Lancer is a tabletop system made by Massive Press that's effectively legally distinct Titanfall with insane robots. Over the last half a year, I have systematically grafted Titanfall back onto it, and it's very convenient that Titanfall fans appear to now be my main audience. No Post Malone in this one, though. The first thing that I did to Lancer was obliterate all of the NPC classes. Every single NPC has been replaced with the Titan classes in Titanfall 2. Northstar, Ronin, Scorch, Ion, Legion, and Tone. Each of them have weapons and abilities that mimic their kit in Titanfall. If you've played Lancer yourself, you're going to quickly notice that the mechanics that I cooked up for these 6 are way more complicated than they are for Lancer's vanilla NPCs. For proper context, a Lancer NPC analog to Ion is the Scurr. It fires an electric lance and it plays around its own heat similar to Ion's energy mechanic. The Scurr has a whole 3 mechanics, and one of those is its gun. NPC classes do have optional systems that you can give them, but none of them are very interesting either. That's because Lancer as a system is balanced like how most TTRPGs are. The DM is there to supply faux fights for the players to annihilate and feel powerful. I didn't know this going in, and was lured in by the promise of a genuine tactical challenge of DM versus players, and I did not end up receiving it. So I made it myself. Ion, just like in Titanfall, is the most straightforward. She has her splitter rifle that does damage and heat, and a tertiary laser that can be used at longer ranges with higher accuracy. When a Titan succeeds at any roll that isn't guaranteed, they get a core token that is meant as an analog to your core power in Titanfall. They can expend these for a variety of actions, or save up to 6 for their core. Ion has her laser core, which is represented by a massive line that does a bunch of damage to all targets in the way, with a save to take half. Ion also has a unique reaction that requires core tokens, which is her vortex shield. It works identically to how it does in Titanfall, avoiding the damage and flinging the projectiles back at a target of the Ion's choice. Ion's tripwires are often used in gameplay more like a grenade that you chuck at someone rather than a genuine tripwire, and so that's how it's modeled here as well. It's a line attack that starts and ends anywhere within her sensors and does damage to those affected. I found this to be a really engaging enemy to run, and I got universally positive feedback from it during playtests. Ion, the other Titans, and a whole host of changes we'll go into were all in service of a larger project called LANCERFALL. There were 2 main problems with Lancer that I wanted to fix with this project. I wanted to add more tactical depth to NPCs, and I wanted to make combat more consistent. In Lancer, health is too low, and damage is too high. Both players and enemies felt like they were made of pixie sticks. Whoever shoots first will annihilate the other. On top of that, the rules for resolving losing significant chunks of health are incredibly random, which makes everything so unstable. My answer to fixing this problem was the nuclear option, wiping out every single NPC class, completely ignoring the template system, making giant swathing changes to the balance across the board, and starting again. There have been so many changes that this might as well be an entirely unique TTRPG system. I did my best to make all of the NPCs play exactly like they do in Titanfall. A Scorch at range is at best kind of funny, but up close will bake you into a deep dish. Scorch has their gas canisters and flame wave as well, which are used like grenades for damage as well as massive area denial. I had a few players learn very intimately that running headfirst into a Scorch is exactly how you die. My favorite creation, though, is how I modeled Tone. In Titanfall, you get locks as you fire on targets, which can be consumed after you get to 3 to fire tracking rockets that do a heap of damage. In LANCERFALL, Tone's 77mm tracker cannon applies lock-on to targets fired at, and their tracking rockets fire at all targets with lock-on in the scene. Lock-on is a mechanic from Lancer which gives accuracy to the next attack against a target, so Tone having good tone on someone can potentially help their allies as well. I did try my hand at unique mechanics entirely divorced from Lancer's base mechanics, and Tone has 3. They have a multi-missile lock which can spread damage between targets, a particle wall that acts as a painted line which blocks damage, and lastly, the Tone's core, Salvo Core, is a bunch of missiles. I could have very simply made this an attack, but I wanted to play with how Tone is able to fire missiles directly up in the air and then paint a target with them, so this is what I settled on instead. When Tone uses their core, they pick a tile. At the end of the Tone's next turn, it explodes in a blast 2 explosion for a boatload of damage. The location the Tone picks is entirely secret unless the players roll a systems check against the Tone to try to identify where the salvo core is landing. When Tone fires their missiles in the air, there is an ungodly amount of tension as people debate whether or not it's safe to stay where they are. Obviously, as the DM, you can cheat and lie as to where you selected the Tone to fire, but I have enough self-restraint not to do this. The NPCs aren't the only thing that I changed. In my effort to make combat consistent, I had to pretty much rework every major mechanic. Players get a flat 2 times health buff, which can be ridiculous if properly min-maxed, but in return I don't feel bad for shooting them. The vanilla HP values are so low that if you're unlucky you could genuinely lose your entire mech in only a few hits, something compounded by the structure and stress systems. Players in Lancer effectively have 4 health bars. When you lose all your health, you take a structure damage and roll from this table, and then reset your health to its max. I do actually like this system, except that the effects from structure damage can range from a mild inconvenience to losing your only weapon to your mech exploding. I found it incredibly frustrating to structure someone twice and they arbitrarily have their mech explode when it should have been only halfway through their health. This wouldn't necessarily be a problem if it could lead to interesting gameplay, but pilot gameplay has almost no options, so one of your players just misses out on any fun they could have for the rest of the mission while everyone else is fine. So naturally, I wiped the old table completely and replaced it with something incredibly simple. When you get structured, you roll a 1d3, begin gaining 3 status effects: impaired, shredded, or exposed. If you take structure damage when you only have 1 left, your mech is gone. This goes for players and enemies. I gave all NPCs with the exception of Reapers 2 structure. By default in Lancer, there's really no narrative explanation whatsoever for why the player mechs are different from NPC ones, which is pretty silly. I figured that if they're facing Titanfall pilots, any Titan with a pilot inside should have at least 1 extra structure so they don't just get one shot. On top of that, pilots can get a whole host of new mechanics because they literally didn't have any before. They can hop out of their Titan with a core token to make it so that their Titan is an auto-Titan while the pilot is busy. As a pilot, they've got very good mobility and a handful of tactical options. Use their tri-rifle to damage enemy mechs from afar, or go in for a rodeo. Rodeoing is my favorite mechanic in Titanfall, and so I had to represent it here. Pilots can, as a full action, force a save from a player, and if the enemy mech fails, the pilot gets on. If the player doesn't call for friends to help with their pest problem and the pilot lives long enough to make it to the next round, they can pull the player's battery out and eject away. Just like how it works in Titanfall, getting back in their Titan with the battery nets them with a bunch of health and core power. And if you want to be evil, you can ignore the save completely and force the players to coordinate. That'll show them. If you find yourself a battery down with a dinged up mech, you have access to repairs to fix that. How many you get are a function of your mech's stats and your pilot's hull stat. This mechanic is absolutely fucking horrible. At any time in combat, you can use your entire turn to full action stabilize, and this gives you a handful of options. You can repair your health or clear heat, and either reload a loading weapon or clear a condition. If you repair your health, it only costs 1 repair, and even before the HP changes, can heal upwards of 30 or more HP. Repairs aren't a limited resource either. This Raleigh has 8 repairs, making its effective health 352 in a game where enemies do 8 damage. Stabilize comes with another problem in that for almost all of the mechs in the game, it's the only way to reload certain weapons, like the Caliban's double-barreled shotgun. To reload your gun, you have to sit and heal your mech using an entire turn to do so. That is absolutely horrible for the combat's pacing for that player, and so to no one's surprise, I saw incredibly few loading weapons ever used. For an analog of what this is like to Titanfall, it's a bit like Ronin's leadfall shotgun. Sure, the damage on it is pretty good, but half of your gameplay is spent watching this goddamn reload animation. I decided to fix these 2 birds with 1 stone, and I think this is my favorite change in this entire overhaul. If you want to go and run Lancer yourself, I highly recommend making this change at the bare minimum. Stabilize has been split in half, Equalizer and Escape Plan style. Stabilize now still exists as a quick action, and with it you can either clear a condition or reload, and that's all it does. To repair your mech, there's a new quick action called Botched Repair, which lets you spend repairs to get flat HP back, and you can spend multiple at once for diminishing returns if the situation is dire. You can use both Botched Repair and Stabilize in the same turn if you wanted to, so you can still use it like the old Stabilize, but you're not forced to do both for no reason either. This fixes a lot of problems. Loading weapons are actually usable, and repairs are no longer omega busted depending on how you build your mech. Them giving flat HP rather than your whole health bar is important. A repair now has the same value for everyone rather than their efficacy being dependent on how beefy your build is. High HP mechs like the Tortuga are realistically probably invincible in normal gameplay, and this fixes that while letting their tankiness still feel impactful. If you were going to use this ruling yourself, you might want to tweak the numbers. Obviously, mine is built around player mechs having 2 times HP. Some mechs have HP as low as 6, though this is heavily modified by the pilot's skills. For default HP values, starting at 7 or 8 and then going down by 1 would probably work fine. Loading weapons might also be too good now, but I don't care. Better that than never getting used. I also reworked Structure's sister mechanic, Stress. Mechs and Lancer have their normal health bar that depletes from getting shot at, and a heat health bar that gets worse as you use certain abilities, get tech attacked, or shot at by certain attacks. This almost never came up, however, because anything that deals heat is incredibly boring and, frankly, really bad. Most heat on enemies generated by players will be via electronic warfare with tech attacks, which is simultaneously dull and a waste of time. Not only is hacking someone less cool than shooting someone with a fucking gun, it's basically useless for one simple reason. Stress and structure are the two ways to disable enemy mechs, and they are completely independent from one another. You choose one or the other to damage, not both. Optimally, your comp should either be full into tech attacking, which is a resident sleeper for all participants, or full into raw combat. Otherwise, you're attacking completely separate health bars and failing to actually whittle anyone down. Tech attacks also run into the classic debuff class problem where you have to ask yourself, would you like to debuff the enemy with a -1d6 to their rolls? Or would you like to instead separate their head from their torso? Death will always be the most potent debuff. Both player mechs and Lancer's default NPCs are split roughly 3-to-1 normal attackers versus tech attackers. I think this ultimately works much better for NPCs, as it gives players a lot more things to worry about, but ultimately it runs into the same issue where if a player somehow manages to suffer a reactor meltdown, it's almost certainly because they were trying to intentionally saute their mech. My solution to this isn't very elegant, and if I'm honest, a bit outside the scope of even this overhaul. But I made stress handle very similarly to how structure is handled, just for consistency and to prevent mechs from arbitrarily exploding halfway through their health. I was very disappointed with how Lancer supports Infantry. Combined arms warfare is ubiquitous in Titanfall, and so I naturally wanted to use Lancer's infantry class, squads. I had to completely rework them as well, because their mechanics are so shallow and silly. Their token is max size to represent them being spread out among the battlefield, but killing them makes no change to their combat effectiveness except when you get them past half HP, where they suddenly lose half of their attacks pretty arbitrarily. A squad with only one member remaining is not only just as large as a squad with 10 members, but also half as effective. The band-aid applied to Grunt's massive size that they always get soft cover, but I have an alternate, really complicated solution. Change the enormous size from 4 to 3. 4 is basically nothing except make it impossible to click on other tokens trying to occupy the same space. I also made two different types of grunts. You have your standard humanoid kind and the mechanized kind. Mechanized infantry are composed of 7 specters and 3 stalkers. Each one of them has their own attack, and as a group are a little bit more tanky than organic grunts while being focused more towards raw suppressive fire. Spectres also have a unique anti-Titan ability straight out of Titanfall 1 called Swarm. They all jump on an enemy mech, and the player has to roll system saves equal to the amount of specters attacking, or lose out on being able to attack on their next turn. Human grunts, on the other hand, are far less survivable, or suicidal, and have access to 3 different anti-Titan weapons as well as the ability to radio for an allied Titanfall. The damage the squads deal is entirely dictated by how many of them are still alive, so killing them does have a tangible benefit. To prevent too much bloat on the battlefield, not only do all squads act at once, there are also rules in place to let squads merge up as well as benefits for doing so. The balance for the last 3 Titans, which are Legion, Northstar, and Ronin, have been in flux for a long time. It's been pretty difficult for me to find ways to make a class like Northstar interesting when they're boring as hell to play in actual Titanfall. I will almost certainly continue iterating on them, but here's how they currently stand. Legion has one main ability that his kit centers around called Overwhelming Firepower. It lets Legion immobilize itself as a protocol and in return gets to fire at all enemies within range with difficulty for free. On top of that, when immobilized, Legion gets light 'em up and can fire twice per turn. If the targets Legion is firing on are out of cover, the attack is even deadlier. If Legion gets enough core tokens to activate his smart core, he permanently ignores cover, gets the benefits from Overwhelming Firepower outside of immobilization, and gets an even better attack. Oh, and he's got a shotgun blast power shot and 10 overshield to represent his gun shield. Classic. Ronin's lead wall unique's gimmick is that as long as the Ronin keeps hitting, the Ronin can keep attacking. I briefly did apply this to Northstar's railgun as well, before a Northstar shot someone for 51 damage in one turn, where I promptly removed it. Ronin's sword is a little silly. All IMC Titans get 1d6 plus 2 melee attacks, and Ronin gets 2d6 plus 4 melee attacks instead. Ronin does also have the funny ability to go into phase space and become intangible. When he does this, his sword becomes supercharged and deals additional energy damage on its next strike. Ronin also has his Arc Wave, attacking in a line and turning off Overshield and proccing a systems check for debuffs. Ronin's Sword Core also gives his sword the same ability that his Lead Wall has, gaining the ability to keep attacking as long as he doesn't miss. Last and most definitely least is Northstar. Highly mobile sniper is unfortunately not a very fun enemy design to make engaging. Currently it's incredibly fragile in return for being very mobile. I have also remade this Titan's design like 3 or 4 times, so who knows if this will stay. Northstar has 2 ways to attack with their railgun, either uncharged or charged. Uncharged has higher range and lets the Northstar move on attack, and the charged version is lower range for a significant damage boost. The idea is that Northstar starts combat far away, getting closer with uncharged shots until they get close enough to fire charged rounds, and they try to stay at their max range to stay safe. They also have their tethers and cluster missile for area denial. They'll want to stay hovering when applicable too, as it's far less likely they'll die in the skies. And their flight core is just the Monarch's core power. I had 3 of my total 13 players decide to use this mech, and I wanted to get my revenge. You may have noticed that these Titans' cores are really powerful, and that is intentional. Titans rarely ever get enough tokens to activate their core. When was the last time you saw an enemy in a TTRPG game succeed at 6 different things before dying? The Titans who are best at getting new core tokens, like Tone, have underwhelming cores to compensate for how relatively easy they are to get. I don't see any problem with them having good abilities at their disposal if left unchecked. The next part of the game that I want to overhaul is character creation and encounter design. Players get access to so many options that are either completely busted or super overcomplicated and useless. They either lean far too close to the I ignore this mechanic and always win side, or the if I have used lock-on on a target without moving and it's Tuesday and the target is half health and I roll 3d6s, if I have used lock-on on a target without moving and it's Tuesday and the target is half health and I roll 3d6s and the result is visible by 2, then I can lock into another target within half of my sensor's range. Levels of pointless, which serve to do nothing except slow the hell out of the game. Overall, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do because I haven't done this yet. Here is my very early forecast for LANCERFALL 2. All of the mechs in the base game are going straight out of the window. I might use a few of their designs for inspirations, but I'd like to largely recreate Titanfall 1's Titan customization. You pick your chassis, weapons, ordnance, and core. I'll probably want to also take a look at classic class archetypes like what's already in Lancer for the type of playstyles that I want to make sure are supported and playable. I absolutely do not want to include any summoner or drone-oriented ones though, as they are always a huge waste of time that makes your turn take about 3 times longer than it needs to be. In general, I designed my NPCs to be extremely understandable and simple, and I want to design players the same way. You may have noticed this, but I seriously cannot stand inconsistent abilities. Default Lancer's Ronin has this ability where half the time they can reflect attacks back. I used this as the basis for Ion's Vortex Shield and modified it to be consistent. I will absolutely be remaking player tools to be the same. Nothing like synthetic muscle netting where you completely ignore mechanics but guarantee buffs and bonuses rather than incredibly powerful abilities that only work half of the time. As for who the players will be fighting, I basically want to run TTRPG Frontier Defense. I've been really enjoying playing it recently and I think it would work really excellently with this kind of system, especially as a West Marches formatted game where whoever is available when sessions happen can play rather than a strict group. Come together and protect the Bitcoin harvester for a while, get access to new gear after missions, come together as a team of pilots to decide on what you want to upgrade both in between waves and in between entire missions. I also want to incentivize death a little bit, but I'm not really sure how to do that. I considered having everyone narratively play Simulacra, so the death of individual bodies isn't very impactful, but I'm not sure yet. If I do decide to commit to that, another thing I've considered is letting players call in and play multiple Titans at once, but the amount of actions that you get don't change. For instance, your whole team gets a budget of, say, 6 Titans for a mission. If there are 3 players, each get 2. You can call them in at the same time and split your actions between them, or wait until the first one dies to Titanfall in the second. All of these ideas are very, very early on, so I'll stop ranting for now. If you have ideas for LANCERFALL Season 2, do let me know in the comments. How to allow for deaths, what kind of upgrades to give, what cores to include, that kind of thing. If you would like to play LANCERFALL for yourself, I can't guarantee that you'll be able to play in my game, but I will have a huge list of assets available for download in my Discord. These include all of the tokens I have used, the NPCs sheets, as well as a complete list of all house rules and changes I have made to Lancer as a system. The reason these will be in my Discord is just so that it's easier for me to update over a YouTube video description. All of this is available for free, obviously. Now I will give you a disclaimer, I am not a programmer. I used Foundry to run this game, and that's where their sheets will work. Seriously, you should upgrade from Roll20. But they're botched together from vanilla NPCs, and although they are heavily modified, you will have to do some work yourself. If anyone does actually know how to edit these, get my homebrew shit to work properly, I would love your help. You know, massive press? Call me. I will admit that I thought about putting it behind a Patreon paywall, but I think I could genuinely get DCMA'd by both Massive Press and EA if I did that. This whole project was a huge amount of work though, so I'll happily take your money if you want to give it. Speaking of which, thanks to Emmy for their reckless financial abandon. Both them and the rest of my patrons are wonderful people. Like, comment, subscribe, you know the drill. And have a good night.